and welcome to episode number 45, The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And with 2 weeks to go in the regular season, we have a three-way tie for the 5 seed.
That's nuts. When Anthony started the season, what was it, 6-1, I think? I could not have predicted that he would be part of a three-way tie, just fighting his way to get a playoff spot. But here we are.
Yeah, God, poor Team Resnick. They have they started out 6-1, and they're 3-7-1 since then. What is the record since?
Oh, yeah, I checked a stat in a chat to you earlier. Let's see if I can find this. Since starting the season 6-1, Anthony is 3-6-2.
God, did that include this week or no?
No. So it's now 3-7-2 after this week.
That's I don't think that's very good.
No. Playoff team cannot be going 3-7-12 over a 12-game stretch.
It cannot.
That's not going to cut it.
No. But yeah, we had a busy week this past week. Not a lot of huge trades at the deadline, maybe our quietest deadline ever, but still a lot going on and a lot of really interesting trades that didn't get made.
Yeah, I almost think what didn't happen and kind of like what went down behind the scenes was more interesting than the actual trades themselves. And it's kind of funny because, like, if you remember last year's deadline, we had like the Albies Hader and Hayes and Picks deal for Luzardo, Urias and Fletcher, and let's see what other. We had Pearson, Kirilloff in a first for like Gallen, O'Neill Cruz, Drew Waters, and Ian Happ, Alberto Mondesi. Like got packaged with Kiner Falefa and Anderson Tejada for Kyle Seager and Jordan Groshans. Like the list goes on and on here. There were a lot of big deals leading up to the deadline. There was a Springer for Machado blockbuster, the Goldschmidt Betts deal. I mean, there weren't really any of those this year.
No, I guess the closest thing was the Berrios Perez deal, but we both agree that was very one-sided.
Yes, and we'll get into that in a second. But why don't we dive into these deals now? How do we want to do this? Do we want to do these chronologically, or are there certain deals we want to talk about first?
I guess let's go chronologically. I guess the most recent trade. Where did we leave off last week? Did we talk about the?
We talked about Lorenzo Cain. We talked about Locaine, and we predicted how many trades would go down in between now and or between when we recorded the podcast and the deadline. You guessed 9, I guess 13. I actually hit the nail on the head. There were exactly 13 trades, although that included a third-round pick swap and what I think is the biggest deal at the deadline. Big League Yell champs agreed to trade a player to be named later to Danger Moose for Ian Desmond.
Yeah, great trade. Ian Desmond, as Andrew knows for sure, is a superstar.
Yeah.
Getting
great for the Rockies in his career. Let's see these numbers here. He had an 87 WRC plus his last full season.
All right. Top that off with some very interesting defense.
He had a 2020. He had 22 homers and 20 stolen bases with the Rockies in 2018. You know, if he comes back in 2022, plays a full season, no reason he can't repeat that. He's got multiple 2020 seasons in his career.
Hey, all right. How old is he now?
He is 35. He'll be 36 at the start of next season.
Okay.
And yeah. His latest report on Fangraphs says that he intended to opt out of the upcoming season, quote, for now. So he could be the type of guy who comes back in time for a fantasy playoff run and really makes a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And on my end, it's nice to have a player to be named later. The player to be named later could be anyone. It could even be Ian Desmond. So I'm just excited to see what the possibilities hold for my team.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll decide that Ian Desmond's capable of moving back to shortstop and trade utilities.
I still, and you know that game we play where we say what player we associate most with another player. I still associate Ian Desmond with Danny Espinosa.
Yes, I was about to say the same thing. I'm glad you said that. That is literally like the one player I associate him with the most.
That middle of the infield for the 2011, 2012 Nationals, they're iconic together.
Yes, they are literally bonded together for life.
When Desmond was actually legitimately non-ironically good.
Right, exactly. I would say that Ian Desmond and Danny Espinosa are the Nationals version of Aaron Harang and Bronson Arroyo for the Reds.
Ooh. Or maybe the Nationals version of Adam Duvall and Scott Schebler for the Reds.
Ooh, that's a good one. I forgot. Man, Adam Duvall and Scott Schebler both shared an outfield at one point. That's hard to believe now.
They did. They both hit 30 home runs in the same season.
That's even harder to believe. There's no way that happened. Oh my God.
I mean, Duvall's legitimately really solid, and he was traded at this deadline, right? Do we want to talk about that deal now that we're talking about him?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Why don't we jump to the Duvall deal quickly? The Crone Zone traded Adam Duvall and Erik's 2022 third-round pick to Conor for Austin Hayes. I'm not gonna lie. I've been the biggest Adam Duvall hater forever. And Adam Duvall is like actually not been that bad this year from a counting stats perspective. So like 27 home.
I think he's leading the NL in RBIs.
No way. Is that true?
I think I'm almost positive. And not that RBIs mean that much, but in fantasy, they certainly do.
It was like Jesus Aguilar a couple of weeks ago. And I remember
it was him and Duvall 1-2.
Oh my God. If there's no way. We're gonna check this out quickly.
And I mean, he's hitting a lot of home runs. He's been traded to Atlanta now, so I'm not sure what the playing time is gonna be.
No, he's been playing mostly every day.
Okay. There's no player very few players I'm more happy to see succeed than Adam Duvall. He was great for the Reds. I liked him a lot.
Okay, so leaders in RBIs in the NL, Jesus Aguilar is 87, so he's still in the lead. Ozzie Albies is 84, so he's second. And Adam Duvall, third with 84.
Oh, so he did drop from second to third, but still.
Yeah, Machado's at 4 and Joey Votto's at 5.
Hey, Votto's still down.
In the NL. And overall, Adam Duvall is tied for 9th with Yordan Alvarez. So interestingly enough, Andrew had the second and third highest RBI guys before he traded away Duvall. I mean, obviously, we all know Duvall's problem. He has a 281 OBP. So, that's not going to cut it. And somehow 5 stolen bases this year after not having one since 2018. But honestly, I like this return better for Conor. I think he could be sneaky good. I think Conor has to use him in doses to avoid the hit on the OBP, but it's not like Conor's been a particularly good OBP team in the first place. And I drafted Austin Hayes in the inaugural draft, and, I still like Austin Hayes, but like he has been pretty bad this year. I kind of get why
he's got a 285 on base. So there you go.
Yeah, he only has 13 homers. I get why Andrew made this deal. I'm not particularly high on Hayes, even as an Orioles fan, but I guess nobody's really offering him anything much better. And Lord knows Andrew tried.
Yeah, Lord knows Andrew tried. I think Conor did really well here, and I think it's a decent risk to gamble on Austin Hayes if you're Andrew.
A very cheap risk. Like
that's true.
He's not going to miss Austin Hayes.
He's not. And yeah, I think we can power through some of the minor deals. Paul Sewald for 2024 third. What do you think?
I like that for Ruthvik, just because I think Paul Sewald is solid, or he's been pretty solid this year. And I don't know, 31, he's a bit old. I think this is the type of guy Ruthvik could probably flip next year for a higher return. But like, it's kind of fine. He didn't really need him, but it's like, it's a fine deal, especially with Diego Castillo landing on the IL now. He should get some saves.
Yeah, I agree. Ruthvik, I mean, maybe you can say it's not really what a team in his position should be doing is buying relievers, and say someone like Erik, we said, why wasn't he the one giving up a 2024 third for Sewald? But from a value perspective, I think it's a good deal for Ruthvik.
Yeah, actually, this would be a good time to talk about this. Erik is currently rostering one reliever, or as of today, he's picked up two since then. And I think it's a really hard strategy to basically be punting both saves and holds. And I wonder if that's going to catch up to him. And I was telling Candace off the air, my prediction, maybe a bit bold, but I'm predicting that like at some point, like probably in the semis against Cam, because I think they're destined to play. I think he's going to lose like 6-5-1 or 6-6, and the difference is going to be is like Cam's going to get like a hold or two, and it would have been a category that's very winnable for Erik all week, but because he wasn't putting in the effort to even win one of those two categories, he's going to lose. And it's nothing against the rest of Erik's team. I think he's built a very solid team other than the bullpen, but and I'm not one to put a lot of assets into the bullpen usually. I guess I did it this trade deadline, and we could talk about that in a bit, but like you have to give it some attention.
You do.
All the categories count the same. It's not like holds count less than stolen bases, or homers, or it's just, I don't get it.
Yeah, and I think EBO has shown us how there are definitely flaws with punting a category, in that if you have a bad week, say your reliever, say your starters get blown up, or say your offense has a down week, then you have a lot less of a chance to make up for it elsewhere.
Exactly. And I mean, we've seen plenty of weeks for EBO this year where they've had higher ERAs and they've lost because of that. So, I mean, I don't think what Erik is doing is as potentially risky as what EBO is doing, especially because for Erik, it's more correctable in the sense that you just pick up a couple relievers, relievers are the one thing that's easy to get after the trade deadline, but given the price of some of the relievers at the deadline, i.e. Raisel Iglesias, i.e. Paul Sewald, Will Smith, just to name a couple, I think it would have been beneficial for him to go after, one or two of them, just stabilize the pen a little bit.
Absolutely. What else? Do we want to talk about Aaron Ashby for a second rounder?
Yeah. Who the hell is Aaron Ashby? Like, I knew of his existence before this trade, but I didn't know much about him. Like, the Brewers have essentially been using him as an opener since they've called him up 3 games, 6 2/3 innings. He has a pretty strikeout rate in the minors, 14.21. But like, is this worth giving a second round pickup for?
I don't think so. I mean, he's always walked a lot of guys, including in the majors. And he's averaging, he's been an opener, and he feels, if he had been going deeper into games, I would say, yeah, this makes sense. It feels like an Erik guy. He's 23. He's 50 future value on Fangraphs, but he's not going to help Erik's team right now. Erik can still stash him in the minors, but I don't really think he's worth a second to begin with. And it just kind of feels like, I don't want to say pointless, because he can still be a decent guy at the start of next year. Maybe he's even in the Brewers rotation full time. But it's a little weird for sure.
I mean, for the record with Erik, like Erik has been able, I mean, and he has a lot more hit or misses than hits, which is just kind of inevitable for these types of players. But, he'll pick up these guys because he thinks they're interesting. And some of them, actually developed and become something for him. And maybe Ashby's the next one. But like, I don't see the appeal. And especially not for a second round pick. If you traded away a late third round pick for Ashby, fine. but a second round pick, especially EVO's second, which could be in the top half of the draft. Like if EVO misses the playoffs, I'm just not seeing it.
No, absolutely. Especially, I mean, Ashby, I guess he's not going to lose prospect eligibility anytime soon, but he's just kind of, there doesn't seem to be a lot of buzz around him or anything.
It feels like the type of guy that like will probably like reach the innings like limit by the end of April, and he probably won't be pitching that well, and Eric's just going to come in. If I had to guess what's going to happen with him, maybe it'll take a little longer if he's just being used as a glorified opener. But even if he's an opener, he doesn't really have much value at all, or he has negative value. Actually, you could argue.
Yeah, I think he might.
Yeah. I think we agree here. We're not going to beat a dead horse any longer. But speaking of Erik and small trades, Erik traded Abraham Toro to Moneyball for Eric Pena. One of two trades Yuki made kind of over this month pre-deadline. I didn't like this one for Erik either. Why don't you start this time? What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not super high on Eric Pena. He was a guy, I mean, I thought about drafting him in the early third in 2020. And he was a guy, he was fine. He's super young. He's 45 future value, but he hasn't hit very well in the complex. And he's striking out a ton. So he just kind of seems like an expendable young guy who you can find a lot of guys just like him on free agency. Whereas Abraham Toro, ever since he was traded to Seattle and getting an everyday role, has been absolutely lighting it up. Just looking now at his numbers, since coming over, he's got a 150 WRC plus. He's walking as much as he's been striking out. 402 on base. He has just been really, really great, and he's still 24 years old. He's got a place on this team for the next 5 years. And I think Toro could have fetched a much bigger return than that.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna start for sure. Abraham Toro for the Mariners. There's no competition for his playing time. I mean, we all know the highly publicized trade that Jerry DiPoto made to go get him. I mean, he was really high on him, and I've been really high on him. I've rostered him in the past, and the only reason I gave him up was because he lost minor league eligibility. He's been a victim of the deep infield in Houston. And now that he's getting a chance to play every day, he's shown what he can do. The 9 homers and 4 stolen bases over 219 plate appearances is solid. And you're right, the numbers look a lot better in Seattle when he's getting regular playing time, and he's only 24. He'll be multi-position eligible next year too, a third and second. It feels like the type of guy Erik should have held on to. Like I would have paid more for Abraham Toro. And I asked Erik that day what the price on Toro was. And he said he'd only move him in a big package. And then he ended up moving him for kind of a random prospect. I mean, Pena, I get it, was kind of, a big guy coming out of, international free agency, but I don't think he's anything super special. He has a 68 WRC plus in the complex this year, and 123 plate appearances. It's just it's not something that's worth Toro. If you wanted him, fine, but give up like a third round pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's third round pick. He was drafted in the third round. The year he was drafted. In 2020, and he hasn't seen his stock rise since then. He's just kind of been the same guy as he was. So I don't get it.
Funnily enough, Yuki offered me a Pena for a third round pick before this trade went down.
But yeah, I guess there's one more small trade to go into before we go into the larger ones, and that is you swapped 2027 third rounders with EVO. And why don't you talk about, I guess, the backstory behind this deal?
Yeah. I've kept telling Zane, I was like, well, you're leaving the league. We need to make one more trade. We've talked various different trades over the past couple of months, most notably like a deal for Nelson Cruz. Nothing's really come along. We talked about Nelson Cruz at the end of the deadline, but at that point, I already gotten Swanson and I still had Nimmo, and I was like, I just don't have the space. And Cruz has actually struggled a bit since he's gotten to Tampa. I mean, not like explicitly bad, but like definitely down from his numbers. He at one point we were talking like a Garrett Crochet deal on deadline day, and then finally we were like, let's just swap our worst like prospects. He offered Jared Oliva. There wasn't really anybody I wanted to trade for Jared Oliva. And finally, with like 10 minutes left, I was like, I'll just swap 2027 third round picks. And it actually took him a few minutes to respond. And I sent him texts. It was like 5 minutes, like 3 minutes, 2 minutes. And finally, he was like, let's do it. So we swapped third round picks. Zane and I have made some crazy deals over the years, like most notably the Tatis deal, but we had the Max Fried deal in the offseason. We have had let's see if I can find any others. Like it's just insane the number of deals that we've made together, not just in this league, but in other leagues. And I am truly going to miss trading with him. It's been a ton of fun. And I wanted to make sure we went out with something. So congratulations, Zane, on making what might be your last deal in this league. It's been an honor trading with you and competing with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really has been a pleasure being in the league with Zane. And this feels like he did make a lot of big moves, but if this was his last, feels kind of like a fun one to go out on because we know he liked fun deals too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he purposely didn't do. I think he's trying to balance like wanting to leave what he had for whoever takes over, so that they can kind of mold. But also in recent weeks, he's gotten right back into the thick of things. So trying to figure out like if there's a way to, also compete. I think he ultimately basically did nothing. And I'm trying to see the last trade that he made before this was March 17th, which is hard to believe Zane went more than 5 months in between trades. He traded Roberto Osuna. And then the last meaningful trade he made was the Marcus Semien deal on March 1st. Which looks like a really big loss right now. Whoever takes over this team is going to inherit a really good roster. There's a lot of talent. There's some work that needs to be done, but boy, he has accumulated these picks. And I mean, this team could pretty much do whatever it wants, whatever direction it wants to go. Rebuild, trade all the picks to compete, acquire a bunch of starting pitchers, like whatever this next owner wants to do. I almost kind of envy them because there's just so many different directions this team can go. And I think the trade options are going to be limitless.
Oh, for sure. And especially with how good that lineup is.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I think if this team trades like half of the relievers and gets like 5 or 6 good starting pitchers, like watch out. And they have the assets to go out and get those starters too. Like if we get a good owner replacing him, this team can be a championship contender next year. For sure. Low-key might be a championship contender this year with just how sneakily hard it can be to play them when they're at their peak.
That's true. And I mean, they're tied for that 5 seed now. It's going to be tough.
Oh, absolutely. You did forget one last small trade. Skipped right over it. Deep Sea Devers traded Drew Waters to the White Sox for Travis d'Arnaud.
Okay, I thought that I would have counted that one as a bigger one, but let's let that one be the next one we talk about.
Yeah, that's. Let's be honest here. Travis d'Arnaud has been terrible this year, and he has not been legitimate throughout his career. Ruthvik traded for d'Arnaud thinking he'd be a temporary filling catcher before he goes and gets a real solution in the offseason. And my thought to that is, why would you trade for someone when you're not going to be a playoff team? just to fill in for 2 weeks and then have that be it. And not only that, a guy with a 293 OBP who's been hurt for most of the year. And, you know, I think Ruthvik's counter to that was, you know, he had 180 solid plate appearances last year. Yeah, he had a 386 OBP, a 144 WRC plus, but he had a 411 BABIP with that. He has not had an OBP or a WRC plus above 100 since 2015 before that. So I'm not really buying any part of d'Arnaud, and I think like why Ruthvik wanted him made no sense to me. And to give up Drew Waters, who's actually been like half decent this year.
Waters has kind of dropped off a lot of prospect lists. I know he's down to 86 on Pipeline, and he's dropped completely out of the top 100 on Fangraphs, but still.
Yeah, I mean, he's still 45 plus there. He has 20 stolen bases in the minors. He's a 348 OBP. Like, the K rate's concerning. He's walking at 11.4% clip. I don't think he's much of a... He kind of gives me Ender and Inciarte vibes, where I think he could be a decent option just because of the steals for a couple years, but, like, I don't really think he's going to be much of anything. But he's still better for a team in Ruthvik's position than d'Arnaud. I mean, Ruthvik could have picked up the best catcher in the waiver wire, and he's probably putting up similar numbers to d'Arnaud the rest of the year. Maybe slightly worse, but like, it doesn't make a difference if you're not competing.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Exactly. And honestly, like, I think the fact that d'Arnaud has just been so bad is like the main reason I classify this as a smaller deal, whereas maybe you think it's bigger. Like, honestly, I think the Duvall deal is a bigger deal than the d'Arnaud deal.
Perhaps. I don't know.
But Duvall's the top 3 in ribbies in the end.
Duvall is top 3 in ribbies. You're right. Drew Waters is a prospect who's got like a decent name, even if he's dropped off a lot of lists.
Yeah, he has the name. That might be it at this point. That's probably the best thing he has going for him.
I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, do we want to go through the rest of the deals in chronological order?
Yeah, let's do that. The first one was I traded Cole Irvin, Alejandro Kirk, Curtis Mead, Jacob Amaya, and Conor's 2023 first-round pick to the Flex and Bellies for Dansby Swanson. And the Bellies are taking on the condition related to Conor's 2023 first, where if Jared Kelly needs Tommy John before the end of the season or suffers a similarly big arm injury, that pick converts to Conor's 2024 second-round pick. Since it was my trade, I'll go first here. There's a little bit of an interesting backstory behind this. I initially inquired about Dustin May. And I was basically like, what do I need to add to the pick? Because they told me they were interested in picks to go get him. So I was like, what if I threw in like Alejandro Kirk? I named a couple other prospects and put it in a package. And ultimately, the offer I made to them after all the negotiations for Swanson was the same offer I made for May. They were pretty close to taking it, but at the last second, they wanted a better major league piece than Cole Irvin. We couldn't agree on a piece. And then I asked them, because I'd heard Ruthvik was inquiring on Dansby Swanson, and he had kind of told me what they were asking from him. I was like, well, what's the price on Dansby Swanson? They were like, it's lesser than Dustin May. So I was like, what if I just offer you the exact same package that I was offering for May for Swanson, and they accepted on the spot? I actually had to take a little bit of time to think that one through because it was just so spontaneous. Ultimately, I really like this deal for me because I feel like I just kind of gave up a bunch of extra pieces and then the pick for Swanson. So Cole Irvin was probably my worst starter. I personally like Cole Irvin, but he's a low strikeout rate. He's gotten the results the past couple of games, but it's come with high whips, and I'm a little concerned that maybe there's some regression coming. So I think it was the right time to move off for him, but I think he's a pretty decent gamble for the Bellies. Kirk is always a guy I've liked with the hitting ability. I think he's fallen off a bit this year because he's been hurt in terms of his stock, but he's still ranked like as a top 60 prospect in Fangraphs. He's going to lose his prospect eligibility within his next 30 or so ABs. And I just didn't have the space to roster him at that point. So it was either trade him at the deadline or just kind of lose him. So I was fine including him here. I'm really not that high on Jacob Amaya at this point. He just was a Fangraphs top 100 guy, but he hasn't had a good year. And Curtis Mead's interesting. I mean, you mentioned off the air, he was the next guy you were thinking about picking up, but I ultimately thought that he was expendable. And the first could be interesting because as I've learned today, Jared Kelly left the game, last night's game, after 2 batters with an injury. So we'll see what happens there. As for Dansby Swanson, I mean, he's been improving steadily year after year, not only with the counting stats, but with the peripherals too. Fangraphs has a really good article about that. He's increased his contact, hasn't really sacrificed power. He has a career high of 24 homers, which is 7 higher than his previous career high, which he did in more ABs. He has 9 stolen bases on the season. He has a 320 OBP. I mean, I think we're looking at a guy who could be a 30 homer, 12 stolen base, 320 OBP guy. And while I didn't necessarily need him, given all the bats I had, it just felt like, a good price to pay. And with Tatis gaining outfield eligibility sometime early next week, and with Ketel Marte losing second base eligibility after this season, I mean, it gives me another option in the middle infield. Maybe I slot Correa at short, Swanson in the middle infield, move Tatis to the outfield. I mean, the possibilities are kind of endless. So I'm really excited to have him, and he's already contributed to my team pretty nicely.
Yeah, I think well, first of all, I was really surprised by how well Swanson's been playing this year. Yeah. And you certainly gave up a lot to get him. You've talked about wanting to get rid of that 2023 first because you're supposed to give up a first soon, and you don't want to be that one.
Yeah,
but
So Sarah, I'll explain that quickly. I owe a first round pick and a second round pick to EBO for every MVP Tatis wins over the next 5 years. And I'm pretty convinced Tatis is going to win the MVP, assuming he ends the season healthy. So I'd rather give value for that pick and then settle like my 2027 first round pick now while I'm competing. And then there is also the risk that the pick turn into a second round pick, which actually might happen right now. So there's my little explanation on that.
But yeah, I mean, you definitely gave up, even though you did have a lot of motivation to give up that first, you did give up a lot. And if one or two of those guys turn out really solid, say Cole Irvin finds another level or Alejandro Kirk lives up to his potential, then it could be tough. But I think overall it's a decent trade for both sides. You probably got the win since you didn't give up any huge guys. And then Swanson, if you're convinced that this breakout is real, then that's definitely a win for you.
Yeah, I mean, if he's like a 330 OBP with like 30 homers and 12 stolen bases, I'm going to be really happy with him. And he's just entering his prime. He's 27. It's not like I traded for an old guy. So I think the potential's there, and it gives me some more options in the offseason as well. One last thing I'll add, Dansby Swanson was a guy I initially drafted in the inaugural draft. He was my 14th round pick. And I remember not understanding the rules on draft day and wondering if I was able to stash him on my minor league team, which I was not able to. And I'm curious if I traded him or like how I got rid of him. Maybe I just caught. No,
you did trade him. It was a big trade. Likes of which we have. It's kind of not something we see nowadays, this type of trade.
Now I traded Sixto Sanchez, Dansby Swanson, Shed Long, Ryan Tepera, who's kind of risen from the ashes now after like kind of being a little bit irrelevant after that deal, and Colin Moran to Conor for Gene Segura, who at that time was number 2 on the player radar, having a great season for Seattle, and I really needed a shortstop. Tanner Roark, who I specifically remember being like, this could be like my back end of the rotation guy. He quickly got cut. And Luis Alexander Basavi, who seemingly has just bounced around the league.
Yeah, interesting trade for sure. I think you probably lost this one, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, I'm a huge Segura guy.
You win some, you lose some. Although, it took a while for Dansby to break out, and Sixto, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So
that is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, talking about more recent trades, the next one was probably the biggest one and the most anticipated one of the deadline. That was Ruthvik trading away Sal Perez, Aaron Savale, Luis Medina, and your 2022 first, most likely to be the 12th overall pick in this draft, for Jose Berrios, with the condition that if Savale does not start another game this season, Ruthvik and Nick will send another 2023 first, and then with Conor sending back a second rounder. So kind of a complicated condition, but essentially what it comes down to is Ruthvik gave up way too much for Jose Berrios, and seeming to be a lot of people have been giving up a lot of stuff for Jose Berrios the past year or so.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think the condition is going to vest. Savali is already on a rehab assignment, and I don't think it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think Conor wanted a little bit of protection because he's still competing this year, and obviously the starting pitcher depth is important. I want to give a little bit of background into the Perez talks because I think that this is the most fascinating part of the deadline by far. Ruthvik and I, about 2 weeks ago on a drive where he was shopping Perez at that point, and we talked about doing a Sean Murphy and Slade Sassone. He was a top 75 prospect on Fangraphs in Arizona, starting pitcher for Salvador Perez, which was a trade I was all over. And he was he had to get back, Nick get back to him, but he was pretty much ready to take it. Time kept going on. Other teams made offers, and he eventually reached deadline day with 3 offers in hand. Mine increased because of the other offers. I was offering Sean Murphy, Brandon Nimmo, Zach Eflin, and Conor's 2023 first round pick for Perez in 2/3. Conor was initially offering Joey Bart and Alberto Mondesi, with Nate Pearson's name perhaps being subbed in for one of them at one point, for Perez. And then Erik was offering Jose Miranda, who for some reason everybody is all gaga over now, John Means and Zach Plesac for Perez, and perhaps there was another piece going Erik's way. I'm not 100% sure on that. I thought I was going to lose him to Erik because Ruthvik, the way he made it sound was that me and Erik were kind of the top 2 teams in on him, and Conor's offer just wasn't up to snuff. So I was willing to give up a bit more if that meant he didn't go to Erik, because Perez is having an awesome season. And I'll pull up the stats here in a bit, but ultimately Ruthvik was just I want to shop him and see who's the best stud I can get. And I like the idea because he is retooling, and maybe he would have been able to get a really good player, but I think he just botched the execution pretty badly. I love Jose Berrios, and I have a soft spot for Jose Berrios because you trading me Jose Berrios literally is the reason that I am sitting here staring at the trophy and you are, because he had the clutch quality start that Sunday night against the Cubs in the 70s. And Berrios has been a very solid starting pitcher in his career. I mean, over the last 5 years, his ERAs range from a 3.52 to a 4. But the problem is he's never taken a next step and become an ace like people think he is. The strikeout rate's solid, but, it's never gone above 10. The walk rate's okay, but it's not amazing. He was a 2.52 this year. Never had an ERA of below 3.5. And meanwhile, Perez is having a season that would be good for a regular player, not just a catcher. I mean, I think he has 30... 2 homers and 80 ribbies. So the 80 ribbies is he's top 10 in ribbies. He's top 5 in homers. Is a 309 OBP. So he's not a total bad player there either. And I think what's interesting about him is Sal Perez has only missed one game all year. And he's
crazy for a catcher.
He has missed one game all year, and that's because he had a minor illness. He probably would have played that game otherwise. He had concussion symptoms and still played, like, pinch hit in another game recently, right after Ruthvik traded him. Like, Sal Perez is a very legitimate fantasy asset. He's been the number one catcher this year. And for Ruthvik to only get maybe like a top 25 to 30 starter, like, maybe it would have been fair 1-for-1 given the position Ruthvik's in, but then to add a first-round pick, to add Aaron Savali, and then to add Luis Medina, that's a lot. I think Ruthvik, and the other thing too is that Ruthvik's rotation is fine. His offense is terrible. Let's look at some names here. Travis d'Arnaud, who I've already talked about, Erik Hosmer, who's not really starting every day anymore. He kind of is, but like, he's not doing particularly well with it. Didi Gregorius, terrible. Dylan Moore, terrible. Hunter Dozier has not been good this year. Michael Conforto has been awful this year. Jeff McNeil's been awful this year. Ian Happ's been awful this year. Bradley Zimmer should not be on a roster. Jake Myers probably shouldn't be on a roster. Miguel Rojas shouldn't be on a roster.
Who is Jake Myers? I've never even heard that name.
He's a Houston outfielder who replaced Miles Straw when the Astros traded him for some reason.
I did see that's every week there's a new trade that I'm realizing I missed when I was at Crater Lake at the deadline. I did not realize Miles Straw got traded.
Yeah, he got traded for basically no one. It made no sense, but that's a rant for another time. And then let's not forget Ruthvik as Willie Calhoun, because like I don't know why he's still rostering him. Willie Calhoun is cuttable, but and Ruthvik has openly acknowledged before the deadline that he needs to get better on the offense, and he was taking some steps into that. You and I both talked about, we loved what he was doing up until now, but I think he totally bungled deadline day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely respect the idea of, even if your team isn't in it, going after retooling, getting some major leaguers for next season if you think you can compete next season. But this was really just kind of the opposite way to do it. Specifically, he needs bats, not more arms, and he needs to kind of get a quantity of bats, not giving up on the other end of a 5-for-1 deal. So this was just kind of not what it needed to be.
No, exactly. And at the end of the day, I think people sometimes get caught up with building the flashiest, minor league system, or, they want to be able to have the best players at an individual position and just hoard them. But at the end of the day, you're building a team. And there's 12 categories, and you have to make sure you're winning as many of those categories in a week. And, if you are only building like a rotation, which honestly, I look at his rotation, I think it's solid, but I still don't necessarily think it's like the best in the league, despite having DeGrom and Bieber, from top to bottom. And if he's not going to build a bullpen in the lineup, he's just not going to win. I think, his ceiling then is going to be kind of one of those 4, 5, 6 seed teams where they're solid enough to make the playoffs, but they're not solid enough to make noise in the playoffs and actually compete for a championship unless they get really lucky. So that's my Ruthvik rant.
Right. Yeah. Well, you had your Ruthvik rant, and now it's time to have a John Means rant. He was traded for a first this year. Erik got a first for John Means.
Yeah, I'll keep this one short because I just ranted for a while, and I also want you to be able to talk and not just let me dominate the episode. But Means is fine. Like, the FIP is almost a run and a half higher than his ERA, 3.44 ERA, and he has struggled a little bit coming off the IL. But he's traditionally outpitched his peripherals, which leads me to think that this might be fine. And he's actually shown some signs of growth this year relative to the last couple of years in like K rate and walk rate. So I think this is a pretty even trade. I think Conor got a decent mid-rotation arm to really help him for this year. I don't think giving up his 2025 first is all that big of a deal, especially because it's later. But, maybe that might come back to hurt him if he falls off a bit in the next couple of years. But he's probably gambling that he's going to be good. And Erik had a lot of starting pitching depth, as we've talked about earlier, so he didn't really need Means.
Yeah, I think Erik won this trade. I think Means was not at all worth the first rounder. Although I guess I said that about Wade Miley, and Wade Miley's been great. So maybe Conor knows a little something when he's giving up first rounders for mediocre starting pitchers. But Means, I mean, the FIP is really bad. He's kind of been boosted by a low BABIPs the last couple of years, and he is generating soft contact, but I'm not convinced that he's going to be the type of guy who's worth the first round pick. And this could come back to bite him, especially if Conor's kind of down again by 2024, 2025.
Yeah, I think if this ends up being like the 10th to 12th pick in that round, like fine. And keep in mind, like John Means is still relatively young. He's still 28. So the potential is still there for, maybe a little bit of growth or for him to be like a longer term asset for Conor. But like, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you're saying. I think it's fine, but like, I don't think it's egregiously bad, but I don't know if I would have been willing to cough that up for Means.
No, I mean, I certainly wouldn't have. The next trade.
Yeah. Speaking of good starting pitcher decisions by Conor.
Yeah, so Conor traded for Robbie Ray. There was a lot of talk about Robbie Ray for the past 2 months. He was finally traded to Conor. It was Ray and the Tendies 2024 second for Ryan McMahon and Brusdar Graterol. And Ryan McMahon has been having a good year, but I'm not super high in Graterol, and I think Conor did super well here.
Yeah, do you want to talk about the background with the whole Robbie Ray negotiations? Because just like me with the Perez negotiations, I think you have some interesting stories to tell.
I do have some interesting stories, and I'll kind of lump in Framber Valdez with this too, because it kind of appears right at the end. So basically, I've been kind of mildly interested in Robbie Ray for a while. He's been on my radar. I've thought maybe I could acquire him if the price is right. I've been kind of reaching out to Alex every few weeks on the price. He's been reaching back to me. And eventually on deadline day, he says, yeah, I'd be willing to trade Robbie Ray. What about Luis Matos? And I'm like, yeah, I could do that. Would it be 1-for-1? And it takes a little while. He seems to be interested. And then we kind of talked a little bit about maybe swapping shortstops. I know he's interested in Brandon JP Crawford, and I could have used Jonathan VR, maybe get some stolen bases. And then VR dropped out of the trade. So at one point it was Matos and Crawford for Ray. And the way Alex phrased it to me was like, I'm a little hesitant, but if it's Matos and Crawford, then that would be so overwhelmingly good for him that it would be worth it, even though I thought that would be a big win for me also. So I thought that would have been a deal that went through. He runs it by Zach. Half an hour goes by, and suddenly he's like, okay, we'll only do this trade if Jonathan India is in it. So I guess I'm not sure where that came from. Maybe that was when Conor, I guess, put in McMahon. But that would have been too much to give up for me, even though I do like Robbie Ray. He's been pitching great. But in the background of all this, I'm thinking that I have too many starting pitchers. I want to keep having the number of relievers I have, the number of bench bats I have. I'm going to need to trade away a starting pitcher. So I reach out to a few teams. There's some talks regarding Shane McClanahan. There's some talks regarding Chris Paddock. I came decently close to trading Paddock to Clayton and Jake for Andy Pages and Heston Kjerstad, but I was kind of scared away from that by the bad look regarding Kjerstad's not playing in the minors and just that illness he's got. So I was a little scared off by that. Myocarditis, yeah. So I was worried by that, but I was still kind of open to making a trade. Then Alex decides, no, we want India. So I back out of that. I decide, okay, I'm not trading for a starter. I let teams know teams that I had kind of gotten decently far with, saying, okay, the trade that this was conditional on isn't going through, so I'm not gonna make these subsequent trades involving Paddock or McClanahan, which is fine, whatever. And then at about 11:30 at the deadline day, I get a trade, or I get an offer saying, hey, would you do Framber for Valera and a pick? I'm interested because I like Framber Valdez a lot. We seem to come to an agreement. We talk a little bit more about VR, but it seems I seem to be thinking, yeah, I could do Framber. Actually, this was at 10:30, so it was a full hour before hearing back. But I was interested in Framber. It looked like a deal was decently close, not agreed to or anything. Suddenly, it is 11:58. He says, "Sorry, Framber has been traded to Zane." Where at this point, that came out of nowhere. And in the background, I had been telling teams, okay, I'm now once again trading for a starting pitcher. I can now maybe trade away McClanahan. I can now maybe trade away Paddock. I'm back in business. But suddenly I find out, okay, Framber has been traded to Zane. And I guess now is a good time as any to talk about Framber was not traded to Zane. They had an agreement, but the trade, much like my trade with Andrew that didn't go through, which was just a couple PTBNLs for each other, this trade went through after the deadline.
Yeah, Alex said the word trade at 11:59, thinking that would allow him to announce a trade after 11:59, and he announced it at like 12:02. It was, for those of you who missed it, Framber Valdez for Tyler Megill, Brett Beatty, and a second round pick. I personally thought Alex caught a big break not making that trade. I mean, Framber pitched 7 shutout innings today. I think Framber is a much better asset than Tyler Megill, although I low-key really like him. I don't really think Beatty or the second round pick are particularly relevant. But yeah, that was just kind of a weird situation.
It was just weird seeing a trade actually kind of get vetoed for real. So that trade did not go through. I was super bummed that I didn't get a chance to counter for Framber, because I would have offered more than George Valera and a second rounder for him.
Yeah, that would have been a good deal for you. Robbie Ray's been a top 10 starter this year.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. Do you have anything more to say about Robbie Ray or the Framber Valdez deals that never were?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the Robbie Ray deal briefly. I mean, I think that Conor is a big winner of this deadline for trading away a starting pitcher who was having a worse season for a much bigger haul, i.e. the Berrios for Perez deal, and then acquiring Robbie Ray for a lot less. I think Ryan McMahon was expendable for him. He has a lot of hitters. Robbie Ray is probably an upgrade over Berrios this year, as crazy as it would have been to have said that last year when Robbie Ray had like a 7.5 like walk per 9 rate, which he somehow cut down to like the low to mid 2s. Like I just don't see it. I'm not the biggest Gratterall fan, although maybe he's a Dodgers closer in the future. I'm not sure. Either way, like fine, he's okay. McMahon is never someone I've been particularly high on, although he's been running like a 400 OBP since July.
Really? He's hot again? I knew he was hot at the start of April, but I didn't know what he's been up to since.
Well, it's weird because like he's not hitting homers or like driving in a bunch of runs. He's just getting on base a lot. Whereas he's running lower averages and OBPs earlier in the year, but doing it with a lot more production, which I'd rather it be the second way, because like the higher OBP with less counting stats way, because I think that the counting stats are going to come eventually, whereas I think it's hard to predict like OBP coming eventually. And maybe he really takes off to end this year and next year, and Alex has gotten a good deal. But I think at this moment, he could have gotten more for Robbie Ray, given that he has been pitching like a top 10 starter this year. And Robbie Ray is probably other than Scherzer and Lynn, was probably the best starter dealt in between like the beginning of the season and the trade deadline. And I don't necessarily know if he capitalized on that. And both of them had been traded long before the deadline. So he did have the premier starter on the trade market. I think he could have driven up the demand and gotten a lot more if he had kind of played people properly.
I think absolutely.
And it's funny.
Yeah, there were definitely teams interested.
Oh yeah, there were definitely. I was interested. You were interested. Like any winning team. I'm sure Erik was interested. Any team that was winning right now should have been interested. And it's funny though, because I think the opposite happened with Ruthvik. Ruthvik did a great job of playing everybody in the Perez deal up until he closed the deal. Just kind of funny to me to see how these like trade negotiations work behind the scenes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Luckily, we're almost done talking about these trades. I traded Brandon Nimmo to Benintendi's Chicken Tendies for Raisel Iglesias. So Nimmo is a guy I've liked because of the high OBP. I think he's a stabilizer. I think a lot of people disagree with my whole idea that you need some of these high OBP guys to kind of help with your batting ratios, but that's another story. He's batting the leadoff for the Mets. So he's getting a lot of runs. A lot of doubles. He had a 3-hit game off of Scherzer yesterday with a stolen base, a homer. So I've always liked him. He just can't stay healthy. And as you mentioned, when I last made the trade for him, it is a little Babbitt field this year. But after I made the Swanson deal, I just didn't have the space for him. And it was either I was going to move him or Brantley. I think Brantley's more dependable, even if he's older. And I shopped him around for a couple hours without getting much of a bite. And at one point, I literally offered him to Alex out of frustration for a player to be named later. And right before I offered him for the player to be named later, I offered him for Iglesias. And he said no. And then he just randomly came to me around 11:30 and was like, wait, will you do Nimmo for Iglesias? And I was like, yes. And he's like, all right, let's do it. I think Iglesias is definitely a worse asset for the long term just because he's a bit older and he's a reliever. And you know my stance on trading for relievers generally. But I think the gains I can make in saves from having Iglesias on top of Will Smith and Lou Trevino outweighs whatever I'm going to lose from having Nimmo as a bench bat. I had 7 saves this week, and this was without Iglesias getting a save. And granted, Blake Trinan got a save, for example. He's not going to get saves moving forward. Neither will Lois Saiga, who got one on Monday with Chapman back. But this suddenly means that I'm not really punting saves like I was for most of the year one. I only really had Trevino consistently getting saves. And especially with stolen bases probably being a lost cause most weeks because Tatis probably won't be running as much with the shoulder injury, and Yelich hasn't really been stealing as much, and Biggio's been a disappointment there. Although I did get Swanson in his 9 steals. I didn't really want to punt safe. So I think that this kind of is a classic major leaguer for major leaguer. One fits one roster better than the other, so we swapped them type of deal.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Your bullpen's looking a lot better with Iglesias, as any bullpen would. But I do feel like trades for relievers very rarely age well. So I'd be wary about that. You can just ask Blake Parker about that.
Yeah, I see Orton Alvarez about that too.
Man, I was convinced that I didn't actually make that trade because there's no way I would have made that trade, but I did, didn't I?
I feel like everyone in this league has had 1 or 2 players that are kind of like the one that got away. And I'm sure Jordan Alvarez might be one of yours. Although you still have a very great farm and a very great major league roster, but Jordan Alvarez also got away from me. So that makes 2 of us.
Yeah, but yeah, this trade could age poorly for you, but it seems good now. And the final deadline trade that we have to talk about. We've been talking for a full hour about trades.
Oh my God.
Erik traded Zach Plesac and Jordan Montgomery to the Crone Zone for a conditional, or no, for Anthony's 2022 first rounder, which is looking better by the day, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And there's also a conditional second rounder. Andrew would be receiving future second if Plesac's ERA is over 4.3 next year. And I think Andrew did a solid job here. I'm a little worried. I don't know. I don't really know what I think about this one. Plesac's solid.
Have you seen his numbers this year?
I have not. So maybe
they are very bad. Zach Plesac has not been good this year. He has pretty much been the opposite of what he has done last year. He has a 4.87 ERA and a 5.01 FIP. And after striking out 9.27 K per nine last year, that number is down to 6.11. He's not walking a lot, though. He funnily enough, he basically is Cole Irvin's peripherals with an ERA that's like a run and a half higher.
That is interesting.
Yeah. But it's so interestingly, I was listening to a Fangraphs podcast recently, and they were talking about how Plesac last year was relying more on the slider, which is his best pitch, over the fastball, hence the results. This year, he's done exactly the opposite. I think Plesac can turn it around. I think he could be very solid next year and moving forward. But is definitely a really big risk. He's also just low-key kind of a knucklehead. Like the whole COVID thing last year.
He is. That's not wrong.
And I never like acquiring players who are just kind of dumb. You know, eccentric is one thing, but like Plesac has now broken COVID protocols not once but twice in life. Just been really dumb about it. Montgomery has been a lot better.
Yeah, Montgomery's the main piece here, and I guess if Plesac sucks next year, then Andrew gets another pick, so that's fine.
That's like a second piece too. That's a very interesting second piece.
That's true. Yeah, I think Montgomery alone makes this deal probably good for Andrew.
Yeah, it's a shame because Erik's asking price for Montgomery a couple months ago was like a lot cheaper. It was like he offered me Matt Cantorito for Jordan Montgomery 1-for-1, and at that point I had acquired Eflin, and I was like, I want to see what happened Corbin, and that was a mistake. Probably should have gone after Montgomery more, but yeah, Montgomery's been really good. If Plesac bounces back, I think it's a clear win for Andrew. As it stands right now, I think that Andrew still probably wins, but it's close. But this could really change if Anthony misses the playoffs and like the lottery really like works in Anthony's favor, like, or Erik's favor, I guess, because he owns Anthony's pick. Like if that, like if Erik gets lucky and Anthony's pick's like the top pick.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, just if Erik's picking first in this draft, that would be unbelievable.
That'd be devastating.
All right. So yeah, that was all of the trades that went down at the deadline, all 13 of them. Was there anything else you want to talk about in regards to that before we dive into the matchups?
No, let's dive into these matchups. A pretty tame week overall in the matchup front, but there was definitely one really interesting one that had a lot of playoff implications, and that was the matchup between EBO and Anthony. We highlighted that as our matchup to watch, I believe, going into this week, and it did not disappoint. EBO won 6-5 to 1. Very narrow victory. Looked like it could go either way all week. EBO had a pretty solid offensive week, 19 homers, 8 stolen bases, 349 OBP, and the ERA and WHIP weren't that impressive, but they did just enough. A 437 ERA, 106 WHIP. I think the most interesting stat to me for them was they only had one save on the week, and for a team that prides themselves in their relievers, that was kind of surprising to me. It has been interesting because I think they've been getting more holds and less saves recently, which is kind of the opposite of what they were doing earlier in the year. Anthony, not so hot of a week offensively, the 293 OBP. but decent in some accountant categories, and was pretty solid overall. Maybe beyond the OBP. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Cam?
Yeah, I think it was a very interesting matchup and just a huge win for EBO to get them back into that three-way tie. They had, like you said, the hitting was really good. Avisail Garcia kind of carried that team this week. His 3 homers made the difference and 4 runs. Trey Turner also had a great week. Where is he playing for the Dodgers? How are they kind of fitting him in?
Second base, and he's been, I think, leading off basically every game he's played.
Gotcha. And is Gavin Lux not playing very much anymore?
He was hurt last I checked. Maybe he's not hurt anymore. Oh, wow. 22 hours ago, the CBS Sports said Gavin Lux is out for his 4th straight game, and he's healthy.
And I mean, I know he hasn't had that great of a year. But
he picked up a start at third base and second base in his first 2 games off the IL, and then hasn't started a game since. I mean, yeah, for all the hype, he's been a bit of a disappointment. He's got an 80 WRC plus on the year. Wow. Only 6 homers and 3 stolen bases.
Yeah, very disappointing for sure. But EBO, they do have Trey Turner. And pivoting over to Anthony now, he just is collapsing. He was 6-1. We've talked about this already this episode a lot. But he's now part of a 3-way tie. And his schedule the final 2 weeks, he has to face me. And then in his final matchup of the season, he's got to face Conor. So that's 2 playoff teams. And back to back, it's just going to be a gauntlet he's got to go through. I think as of now, he just needs to finish ahead of either EBO or Clayton and Jake. But I think those 2 teams are the favorites to make the playoffs over him.
I think so too. If you look at EBO's schedule, they play Alex and Zach this week. Both the Flo plays Andrew this week, but then they both play each other in the last week of the season, which I think could bode well for Anthony because one of them is guaranteed to take a loss.
Unless they tie.
I think that being said, I expect EBO and Clayton and Jake to win this week, barring something crazy. And if you beat Anthony, I mean, he's going to need a win over Conor, which I think is still very doable. And then one of those 2 teams ahead of him to lose. I don't know if he'd win a tiebreaker. That's something we'd have to go back through and see like which team you'd win a tiebreaker over. And the current 3-team tiebreaker per ESPN setting up the playoff bracket, Anthony's a 5 seed and Clayton and Jake are the 6 seed. I don't know what that's based off of. It could just be based off of their internal coin flip, which could mean that this could be anybody's seeds for now. But man, I mean, Anthony is really, really in danger. I mean, he could have come pretty close. I think he would have basically locked up some sort of playoff spot had he won this week. And instead now, I think he might be on the outside looking in. That's insane, especially after his 6-1 start. I remember us talking about how like he's basically a playoff team just starting this good. But
yeah, I mean, we weren't expecting him to lose to Andrew. We weren't expecting him to tie Alex and Zach. So it's just been a lot of surprising results and just bad losses that have hurt this team. And looking at tiebreakers, EBO does hold the tiebreaker over him, and Clayton and Jake split their series with Anthony. So we'd have to look a little bit closer to see who would hold the tiebreaker between the 2 of them. But I think definitely he would I guess he would want both of those teams to lose out, obviously, and have him get wins. But especially he would probably, I mean, I guess they can't both lose the final matchup, but he would probably root for EBO over Clayton and Jake.
I'd say so.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And I, as the owner of Clayton and Jake's first round pick this year, am rooting for Anthony and for EBO.
Absolutely. I mean, this is all just pretty shocking how this has all gone down. I mean, I remember us at the middle of the season, I think in our power rankings, like I at least I think had Anthony fourth. I don't know if you did.
I think he was fourth for me as well.
I have this written down somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. We both had Anthony fourth. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I had Jake and Clayton at 8 and EBO at 7. You had EBO at 8 and Clayton and Jake at 7. We both had Ruthvik and Nick at 5. Wow. And look how that one's turning out for us. So it looks like our 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 8 teams might be the ones that make the playoffs and not 4 or 5.
That is crazy. I mean, we thought Clayton and Jake were a year away. I mean, we thought they were a playoff team going into the year. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about them later. Yeah. But basically, we thought once the season progressed, we thought they were clearly a year away, and now suddenly they're looking like they could be the 5 or 6.
No, especially too because they traded away Lance Lynn and Zach Greinke in the middle of the year, and they got Kyle Lewis and Luke Voigt. Kyle Lewis has basically been hurt all year, and Luke Voigt's lost his starting job to Anthony Rizzo and has been hurt for a good chunk of the year as well. So like they made some like moves to not win now, like, and now they are still in it, and I think that's the most impressive part to me.
So then what matchup was the next one we wanted to talk about?
Let's talk about me versus Erik, just because there's also big playoff implications for that. I destroyed Erik in what was probably my best week of the season. I led the league in 7 of the 12 categories this week. So I would have beaten everyone. Erik just happened to be the unlucky victim. I think for me, what was most impressive was the way my pitching staff as a whole just demolished his. I had 9 quality starts, and had Garrett Cole gotten one more out, which he should have gotten, but there was an error right before he got pulled on Monday. I would have tied your record for quality starts in a week with 10, but as it stands, 9 of my 11 guys at quality starts, 7 saves, 5 holds, a 2.28 ERA, and a 0.9 WHIP. Just a great week for me. On the flip side, Erik wasn't terrible offensively, although the 8 homers was not amazing. And on the pitching side, I mean, I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, 1 save and 1 hold. And that's just not going to cut it in the playoffs if you're going to be punting both of those categories. As it stands, I mean, I don't expect me to blow Erik out like this if we have to play each other again in the playoffs, but after getting blown out by you a couple weeks ago, it's nice to see that I was able to, face a quality opponent like Erik and, post a blowout. And honestly, with some of these additions I've made at the trade deadline, and also getting Cole Flaherty and Tatis off the IL and having them all perform well since they've come back, I mean, I'm really excited for this team. Do you want to explain the playoff implications for you and Erik since this involves your team?
Yeah, so basically, this puts Erik 1.5 games behind me, which means that he needs me to lose out and have him win out. And perhaps, I guess, he can afford one of us to tie, depending on what the second tiebreaker is. But he basically needs that to get the 2 seed. Otherwise, if I win 1 game, or if Erik loses 1 game of the final 2 weeks, then that guarantees a playoff spot. That guarantees the 2 seed for me, which is obviously a big deal. No team has ever won the finals without a bye. And just having to avoid the first round matchup, which could very likely be against EBO, or even Clayton and Jake, who are super hot right now. Avoiding that first round matchup would be massive, and just getting the difference between the 2 seed and 3 seed is really important this year.
Yeah, low key, we've been talking about Erik as like the probable 3 seed in this scenario. He's only a half game above Conor.
That's true. I did not notice that. Oh my God. Yeah, if Erik, who's Erik play down the stretch?
He plays Yuki and Daniel, Alex, and Greg. So he literally plays the 2 worst teams in the league. And Conor plays Daniel, Alex, and Greg this week, and then Anthony.
So that's interesting. And I mean, I think Erik's probably the 3 seed, but imagine if he falls to 4. That would be, I mean, I would love that because it means I wouldn't have to face him until the finals. And it means you and him would face off in the semis.
Yeah, I mean, Erik's lost 2 straight, so I wouldn't put it behind him. Although, say what you want about Erik's team, other than losing to Ruthvik in Nick week 2, where their team was a lot healthier than they are now, Erik hasn't really lost to any like bad teams. His losses were like, to me, Clayton and Jake, you, me again. I guess he's one loss to Alex and Zach back in May, but like he's been solid against these bad teams. So I fully expect him to end the season on a 2-game winning streak, but maybe Yuki or Daniel, Alex, and Greg play spoiler. That would be fun. Especially because
a lot of fun, not for you, but it would be fun for the league.
Yeah. I also think Conor's going to win out. So I think that Erik absolutely needs to win out as well. And who knows, even if Erik falls to the 4 seed, there's no guarantee Conor would win a 3v6 matchup. And I'd low-key argue that Conor would be the underdog in a matchup against either EVO or Clayton and Jake, especially if it's Clayton and Jake.
I think that's certainly interesting. I don't know if I would say the underdog, especially since the tie would go to him, but I don't know who I would pick in that scenario. Conor 3 versus Clayton and Jake 6.
I think as of today, I might pick Clayton and Jake. Although I really love Conor's trade deadline, as we discussed earlier, and that might be enough to give him the difference in my eyes. But I think, as I've said before, I don't think Conor's played particularly well at points this season. He's just happened to be able to rack up some of these wins, which is a very good thing. But I still think his team's a year away. So we'll see. It's the playoff implications now are just pretty insane with all these matchups. And it's crazy how one matchup can really change things just so rapidly. But anything else in this matchup, or do you want to go through the other 4?
I think that's about it there. Just the fact that the top, assuming, I mean, you, me, and Erik are the 3 best teams. And even if that's not how the top 3 in the standings shake out, we're definitely most likely 2 of us are going to face off in the finals, and it's also very possible that there will be a matchup between two of us in the semis. And we've all Erik hasn't beaten you, but me and Erik have beaten each other, and me and you have beaten each other. It could any combination of these 2 teams really could go either way. And it'll just be really interesting. There's no, I mean, you're the favorite, but it would not surprise me to see any of our 3 teams win the finals.
Oh, exactly. I'm 100% with you. I think any of us could win on any given week. I mean, we've seen that throughout the season. I mean, I'd be curious to, I know like through the first 10 weeks or so, you were kind of diligently tracking like who would win each matchup against each other. And I'd be curious to see what those numbers are going to look like at the end of the season for me, you, and Erik. I think I was winning like 70% of the time against you all the first few weeks. But we'll see how that plays out. I think so Erik is, if he's lost both times to me and he's split with you, he's 1-3 against the 2 of us. You're 2-2 against the 2 of us because you split with me and Erik, and I'm 3-1 against the 2 of you because I split with you and beat Erik both times. So it's not like one of us is 4-0 and the other is 0-4. I mean, this is as tightly knit as you can get. I guess it'd be more tightly knit if we were all 2-2 against each other, but you get my point. It's
it would be.
It's going to be close.
And just looking a little bit ahead at the schedule, I have 3 Yankees huge sluggers in my lineup. The week of the semis, the Yankees face the Orioles. And the week of the finals, the Yankees face the Rangers. So that's shaping up to be really solid for me. And I'm sure you could take a look at your team and at Erik's team and find something similar. But I do I do like those matchups.
Yeah. Atlanta plays Arizona the week of the finals. Having Freeman and Swanson will be nice. And the Phillies play Baltimore. So if Aaron Nola and Zach Eflin get starts that week, that would be fun. But definitely premature. I mean, who knows if I'm even going to reach the finals or you're going to reach the finals. I still think the two most likely finals matchups are either me versus you or me versus Erik. But after that, it's, who knows?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, anyway, moving on to the next matchup. I think an interesting matchup. Conor just barely beat Yuki this week. The score was 6-4-2. Conor had a really solid pitching week with the 70K, 7 quality starts, 7 holds, which was the most of any team this week. He also had one of the better ERAs and whips. And then Yuki still almost beat him, 50 runs. His batting numbers weren't quite as good as they were the previous couple weeks, but he still did do a good job, at least in terms of run scoring. He also had 19 doubles to Conor's 20. He got a really solid week from Brandon Lau, driving in 9 runs, which made the difference to tie the score in RBIs. They also tied stolen bases. But in the end, Conor was able to pull it out and keep pace just half a game behind Erik.
Remember when I traded Brandon Lau for Kevin Biggio?
I do.
Yeah. Not one of my proudest moments, despite the 20-minute podcast rant. But
I knew it at the time.
Yeah, I was glad to kind of go down with my guy. And honestly, I think for him, it's been more of the neck injury this year. I mean, you try and play with a neck injury, it's probably really hard. There is a reason I didn't trade him at the deadline, but I'm not here to talk about Kevin Biggio. I'm here to talk about Conor and Yuki. I think solid week for Yuki offensively, like you said. Conor, very good with the pitching. I mean, he just needs to be more consistent on a week-to-week basis for me to really think he has a chance of winning a championship. Like, as of now, he's probably going to be the 4th seed, but I would argue he's not the 4th most likely to win a championship. I would say that it's probably Clayton and Jake if they make the playoffs.
Maybe.
I mean, I really like what Conor did at the deadline. I mean, I've said this all along. I think he's a year away. And I think he's slowly building the team that he needs to. But and this is a huge jump for him from last year, and especially the first 2 years when his team was like god awful. But given the team we gave him, I mean, it always looked like a 4 to 5 year rebuild. Especially with, some of the moves that maybe he made early on. And I think it's finally paying off, but maybe not this year.
Maybe not this year. But speaking of Clayton and Jake's team, saying that they're the 4th most likely, they dominated Ruthvik and Nick. They beat them 11-0-1, very nearly being the second team to 12-0 Ruthvik this year, or 12-0 anyone. And they, with the exception of your team, looked all around like the best team this week. The on base was solid, 59 RBIs and 45 runs. And just that starting pitching was just on fire. They had 8 quality starts, 93 strikeouts. Not much to speak of in the bullpen, but still a whip below 1 and a 2.60 ERA. And they had a great start from Andrew Heaney and Frankie Montas. Zach Gallen in his first start with his team pitched 7 shutout innings. And Patrick Corbin even was good. And so was Sandy Alcantara and Luis Castillo. And they were just all great. And I would be scared to face this team in this rotation in the playoffs. But as for Ruthvik, I mean, 29 runs isn't good. The on base wasn't great. 6 quality starts was a solid showing, but he had no saves and no holds this week. And actually on Sunday, Jake's team was up 11-1, but winning doubles and tied 0-0 in holds. I commented that Kendall Graveman hold on the final day would get him the 12-0, and it looked increasingly likely that he would do that. And Kendall Graven did get that hold, but unfortunately, Ruthvik was able to tie doubles up to avoid, maybe not unfortunately, to avoid that 12-0.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, great week from Clayton and Jake. I think what's really interesting to me, I mean, you mentioned all their quality starts this week. They traded away Lance Lynn and Zach Greinke very early in the season. I want to say it was in like May, but despite that, they are still very much racking up the quality starts. Let me pull up these standings here quickly. They're first in the league in quality starts with 111, just one above me, 4 above Erik, 18 above or 17 above you. So they're kind of doing it with a little bit of a patchwork rotation, albeit they did definitely just acquire a couple starters at the deadline. I think what they did this week is probably like for them kind of everything coming together perfectly. They kind of suffered from the same problem I think Erik does, in which I don't think they're that strong in the reliever categories. Like they have, actually, I take that back. They are 3rd in saves on the season.
Yeah, it was just a bit of a down week for them in terms of that.
Yeah, okay. I forgot they had some of these closers, but this is just a very solid team. I mean, I think that to jump into the top tier, they probably need to make a couple moves in the offseason. Especially I think to get some more reliable pitchers. But I mean, if one of you, me, or Erik doesn't win the championship, like I think it's them. But that being said, I would be very surprised if one of the 3 of us doesn't win the championship. Like, it's like they're the 4 team, but there's a big drop off between Erik and them.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think so. And he would have to if he gets the 6th seed, then he would have to face all 3 of us. And if he gets the 5 seed, then it would be still 2 of us. And it's a tough path for sure. But that team has been playing super well lately.
If they enter as a 6th seed and beat all 3 of us, I mean, they clearly deserve this year's championship. I mean, that would be a miracle playoff run, and it's not like they're hitting cupcakes to get that victory. I mean, that would genuinely be impressive. I don't see it happening, and that's part of the reason I don't think they have high odds, but it would be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. For sure. In this past week, there was another matchup that was very nearly 12-0. That was my matchup against the Flexin' Bellies. I beat them 10-1. I was only 1 double away from taking that category, and I tied them in quality starts with only 2, so that's an issue. And on the whole, unlike Clayton and Jake, I had a really terrible week this week, and I was just lucky to face a team at their worst. My runs total and stolen bases were solid, and I did get 6 saves. But outside of that, I mean, 11 doubles, 12 homers, 35 RBIs. My OBP was just 307. Like I said, I only got 2 quality starts. I mean, Sean Manaea has just been garbage since I've traded for him. That shows in my ERA. And I guess my whip was not terrible, but overall, my team did not play well. And that's fine because you're going to have down weeks every once in a while. Especially given how well I've played previously. But on the whole, maybe I should have done a little more to help my starting pitching at the deadline because right now, at least this week, it was not very good. And my hitting and against a better team, it would not have been able to pick up a slow week for my hitters.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about the starting pitchers, I mean, you obviously got Manaea, although I don't know why he's been struggling. I mentioned on the podcast his velocity decline like the day you acquired him, and maybe that's kind of spilling over. I wonder for him if it's kind of an innings thing because like he did not pitch. Let's look at this quickly. In 2020, he pitched 54 innings, so he's already pitched more than double that this series at 138.1. But the season before that, he only pitched 29 and 2/3 innings. So I wonder if he's kind of tiring out. And then I wonder if with the A's probably making the playoffs, although I haven't looked at the standings lately.
Yeah, they've got a wild card spot as of now.
Yeah, so I don't think they're taking that for granted, especially them leading the division. But I wonder if they could find a way to take the foot off the pedal for him a little bit as the season wraps up. Although with Chris Bassett potentially out for the year, I don't know if they're going to have that luxury. And then, like, you're very solid at the top. You know, obviously Buehler and Wheeler are probably the top two candidates for the NL Cy Young. McClanahan's been really good since he's bursted on the scene. I love him. Tyler Mahle has been a little up and down, but he's been better as of late, although struggled against the Cubs in his last start. Darvish should be off the IL at some point. You know, Ryu has been his typical solid self. Like, there are good pieces there at the top end. I just wonder if you need a little more depth in that rotation. Eliezer Hernandez is back too. I mean, he's certainly depth, but like, you have 8 guys right now. Pivetta, I think, is the only one I haven't named yet. And like, you know, an injury or two there. And I wonder if, you know, there's a little bit of concern with that depth. But overall, I think you have one of the better rotations in the league. You were down to have a down week at some point after just how well you've played over the past month. You might have been the best team over the past month, low key. And I think you just got lucky with who you were facing, because I think you would have lost to most teams this week.
I think I definitely would have. I certainly would have lost to Erik or you, and a lot of teams as well. But I'll take that luck, and certainly not complain.
Amazing how the luck affects the playoff race too, because like, had you been playing like pretty much any other team this week, you're probably losing, and then there's only a half game between you and Erik. Or what if Erik had played the Bellies? Suddenly, I think Erik's a half game up then over you. So amazing how, you know, who you play can really affect the standings and, you know, what playoff seeds everybody are. So, you know, never take any matchup for granted.
That is for sure. But yeah, there's one more matchup that we haven't talked about from this past week, and that was the Crone Zone falling 2-9-1 to Benintendi's Chicken Tendies. And yeah, Alex had a really solid week this week, especially in terms of on base percentage. He had the second highest OBP this week of any team. He had 16 doubles, 6 quality starts and 5 saves, and that was enough to beat Andrew.
Yeah, Alex is basically having the opposite of Anthony's season, and I'm actually, I've said this before, I'm really high on them moving forward. But so they started the season 0-5, and since then they are playing 500 ball. They're 5-5-4. And 500 is basically what Anthony, Clayton, and Jake and EBO are at right now. They have a 526 winning percentage. So Alex and Zach have low-key been playing like a borderline playoff team like since early mid-May. And I think this team's going to be a lot better next year. I didn't like the Robbie Ray trade for them as much, just because he's been doing so well, and I think they could have gotten more. But I think they're a fringe playoff contender next year, and I'm excited to see them. And you know, I think they're beating up on some of these worst teams like Andrew, like they should. So you know, good for them.
Yep, good for them indeed. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this matchup. It's not going to affect the playoff race in any sort of way. But are we ready to talk about next week?
Yeah, let's do it. There's not a lot of huge matchups this week with playoff implications. of the 7 teams in the playoff hunt, there's only one matchup that involves 2 of them. So by default, that's the one we're going to highlight. There are some very important playoff implications in that matchup, though. It's you versus Anthony. And since this is your matchup, I'll let you start off here.
So I'm facing Anthony. And this is the only matchup between 2 teams in the top 7.
Yep.
And I consider myself a heavy favorite in this matchup, I guess, just because of the way our teams are trending. But just to be fair to this matchup, if I win here, I lock up the 2 seed. So there are very big implications with that. And if Anthony, it means even more to him because he really needs to win here to keep pace with those other 2 teams that he's tied with, who are most likely going to win this week. And a win here, I think, maybe could put him in the postseason, unless EBO and Clayton and Jake tie next week. But a win here is super important for that team, because if not, and if they see themselves fall to 7, it's going to be very hard to make that up next week.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is kind of a do or die week for them. Unfortunately, it comes against you, which doesn't quite help their cause. But hopefully, for his sake, Anthony can pull it off. But I think you're right. I think you are probably the heavy favorite, especially the way he's been playing.
Yeah, I think so. And Anthony does have a shot against Conor next week, but this is really pretty do or die for that team. But yeah, I don't think there are any other matchups that are super noteworthy this week. You are facing Ruthvik,
which would have been a very noteworthy matchup at the beginning of the year. Ruthvik was in the semis and almost made it to the finals last year, and he's fallen off. But I don't see any other matchups that are really worth talking about. I think this is going to be a pretty clear-cut week as for who, wins and doesn't. And let's see if we both agree with that.
Yeah, let's see. What are our standings after last week?
So you and I both picked ourselves to win and Conor to win. So both 3-0 there. I picked EBO and Anthony to tie, and while they came close to tie, not quite. You picked EBO to win, so you make up some ground there. I picked Andrew to win, which didn't happen, and you picked Andrew and Alex and Zach to tie, so another advantage for you there. And we both picked Clayton and Jake to win. So I was 4-1-1. And you were 5-0-1. So you gained some ground.
I did. I haven't gained ground on you in a long time.
No, it's been a hot sack. So I am now 69. Nice. 28 and 17. And you are now 61. 28 and 25. So we're back to the same deal we were a couple weeks ago, where I have 8 more wins, you have 8 more ties, and we have the same number of losses. So I believe that makes you 4 games back with me, with 17 more matchups left on the season. Hard to believe we're reaching the end here, but it's 17 more matchups to pick.
Man, we really are. It's hard to believe we're coming up on the end of it and coming up on a year since we've been doing this.
Yeah, it is really hard to believe. I mean, our first episode, we did talked about a semis matchup between me and you, and I wonder if we could reach like episode 50 and we talked about a finals matchup between me and you. And boy, I think that would be our most fun episode ever to record.
God, I know. I mean, we're lining up for that, right? So it's 45 This is 45. 46 will be after matchup 20. 47 will be after matchup 21 and previewing the first round. 48 will be previewing the semis. 49 will be previewing the finals. Matchup or episode 50 will be, unless I missed something or counted wrong, will be the first matchup after the finals.
Yeah. Wow. Hopefully I get to keep this trophy for another year and I can stare at it as we record, or I'll be staring at it because it'll be right after we finish the finals matchup and I haven't shipped it out, and I'll be depressed that I won't get to look at it for too much longer. But man, I mean, I think it has to be you v me as the favorite finals matchup as of now.
God, that'll be terrifying all week, knowing that we're going to have to talk about it, no matter what happens.
Oh yeah, the episode previewing it at least will be a lot of fun for both of us because neither of us will have won or lost it yet, and we'll both be coming off semis win highs. But I mean, we're going to go really in depth previewing these playoff matchups too. I know we spent a lot of time here kind of recapping last week's matchups and not really previewing the matchups that are happening during the week, but we are definitely changing that during the playoffs. I mean, we will be going very in depth into each matchup. We're going to give this a lot of thought. A lot of research is going to go into it, and it's going to be fun. So,
and the recaps are going to be more in depth too. It's just going to be more in-depth show as well for everyone. You're in for a treat.
Well, think about it. We're talking about 6 matchups plus previewing 1, maybe 2 each week. It would go down to talking about 2 matchups and previewing 1 to 2 matchups each week. So we're going to devote a lot of time, and there's no trades to talk about. So it's going to be long episodes just talking about these matchups, and it's going to be a blast. But we
for sure
both have to get there first. So
we do, and in order to get there, we got to pick our pick the results of this week.
Yeah, let's do it. Last week I let you pick first, and you ended up doing better. You want to pick first again?
I will pick first. I think I'm going to beat Anthony. I think Connor's going to beat Daniel Alex Greg. I think EBO is going to beat the Tendies. I think we're going to pick the same 6 this week. I think Clayton and Jake are going to beat the Crone Zone. I think you're going to beat Ruthvik and Nick, and I think Erik is going to beat Yuki. Do you have any differences in what you're picking?
No, I was literally going to pick those exact 6. This is 6 of the top 7 teams in the league we have picked to win this week, and the only one who's losing is Anthony because he's playing you, which would be a huge L for Anthony if all 6 playoff teams won. But if you recall, last week we basically picked all the playoff teams to win, and all of them but me lost, and then you tied to Yuki. So, I mean, anything can happen in any given week. So, not counting anybody out this week, there are a couple teams we named who are not playoff teams who could definitely serve as spoilers. I could see Alex and Zach pulling it off against EBO, even though I'm not going to pick that. Maybe Andrew is a hot week, although I doubt it. Maybe Yuki's offense keeps it up and he could beat Erik. Maybe Daniel, Alex, and Greg have a little bit in them. They did win 2 in a row before last week, so we'll see. But yeah, I can justify picking a different set of teams than you did.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's why they play the matchups. There's going to be, I bet you that we don't go 6-0 this week. There's going to be something weird that goes on.
No, if I had to predict, we're going to be pretty close to perfect, but there's going to be an upset somewhere. And I think if I had to guess, it's the Tendies beating EBO.
That would be my upset pick as well.
You know what? I'm going to change my pick here. Just let's make it a little different. I'll pick Alex and Zach to win because there has to be some upset this week.
Okay.
And I don't know. It's not like EBO is playing amazing. They're playing better than Anthony for sure. And our offense has been a bit better, but it's not like this team isn't beatable. So I'll pick Alex and Zach. So there's our one different pick.
All right. Love to see it.
Yep.
But yeah, on that note, do we have anything else we want to say before we call it an episode?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say, I figured this stat out this morning. If EBO does not make the playoffs, which I guess the projected playoff bracket has it as happening right now, 10 of the 12 teams will have made the playoffs either this year or last year, which I think is pretty amazing for league parity. Now, granted, like I've been to 1 seed both of those years, and you're also going to be a top seed again. But really awesome to see that there are kind of different teams cycling in and out, and it's not just like the same teams in the playoffs each year.
That's very true. And those 10, and the other 2 teams haven't made the playoffs at all yet. Yeah. But yeah, very exciting. Conor almost certainly will be our next new entrant to the playoffs. So congratulations to him. And very surprising, I guess, to see that team go in before some of the other teams, the team formerly known as Team Cohen and the team that is now owned by Andrew. But yeah, I really like all the parity in this league. It feels like it is dominated at the top by a couple teams, but it's nice to see it kind of cycle through and have new teams kind of enter the top ranks and leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like even at the top, like I feel like you kind of replaced EBO as like the third team in the top 3. So there's definitely some movement up there too, but it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it is exciting. Happy with my team. Gotta say I couldn't have done it without Duncan, all his help. I guess if there are any Cubs people listening, legally I should say that I could have done it without Duncan. But no, he really set this team on a great path, and I'm just kind of the work we did together, just kind of carrying it forward on my own, and hopefully towards the title.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope Duncan's doing well. We miss his presence in the league, and hopefully hopefully some of his work can bear the fruit of a championship, at least for you. I don't want you to win one anytime soon, but for his sake.
For his sake.
Yeah, for his sake, maybe I hope you do, but probably still not.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it for this week. Looking forward to seeing if we've still got a 3-way tie going into next week.
Yeah. Until then, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
What was the last thing I said that was relevant?
Hello and welcome to
Oh, fuck.